Alright, come on now. Come on. No, they are not gonna notice the zit on your face. Where is it? I don't even see it. Wait. Now that, I am not gonna tolerate. Your brother was sitting right here, waiting for you to get onto this camera and... Oh, really? Mario. You ever heard of this guy? He's kind of a niche character in the gaming community. Only the true fans know about him. An elusive figure with lots of lore and backstory to sink your teeth into. Now, if you're one of those smart people, you would have realized that everything I just told you was a lie. But how big of a lie is it? How much Mario lore is hiding in places that not many people know about? At face value, the world of Mario is as simple as a guy who wears red rescuing a girl who wears pink, and like I've mentioned many times before, myself along with many fans of the franchise are always itching for more information on this universe. However, if we look hard enough, we may start to realize that there is far more Mario lore than one may originally think. Scattered across old books, comics, TV shows, and more obscure pieces of media are small tidbits of information that reveal interesting facts about the citizens of the Mushroom Kingdom and beyond. Let's talk about it. Now, before we start, I want to clarify that this discussion is not about story in Mario games. Instead, we are focusing on the lore and background information of the franchise. While lore and story are obviously supplemental to each other, lore takes more of a secondary role to the story, which is usually at the forefront of the game's narrative. Lore provides complementary and often optional information that can both contribute to world building and make the game's characters seem more alive. Like I already mentioned, while not much of this is found in the games themselves, lore pertaining to the Mario universe can be found in plenty of other places as well. This will be part 1 of a multiple-part series diving deeper into Mario's lore. Yes, if you dig deep enough, there is that much to cover. Specifically, this episode will cover a few of the most popular Mario characters, taking a look at their canonical origins, backstory, and other obscure or little-known facts about them.
I'm tired.
To begin, let's take a look at the man that started it all. First name Mario, last name Mario, the guy with the mustache. Of all the characters, unsurprisingly, Mario himself has the largest amount of lore to his name. Firstly, let's talk about his origins, not in real life, but in the context of the Mario universe. There are actually 3 different explanations for Mario's birth and upbringing that I could find. Let's start off with the least obscure and work our way down. So, first off, in Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, the story begins with infant versions of both Mario and Luigi being delivered to their parents in a sack carried by a stork. Now, before we go on, I'm gonna need you to excuse me for a second. I told you that's where babies come from! Don't you ever try and tell me it's that nasty ass again! During the delivery, the stork is suddenly attacked by Kamek, sending baby Mario plummeting down towards the surface. Both the stork and baby Luigi are kidnapped and taken away. One thing to note here is that since the brothers were being delivered at the same time, you can only conclude that this was a twin birth, which is also confirmed somewhere, but we'll get deeper into that later. After baby Mario decides to fall out of the sky, he ends up conveniently landing on the back of a Yoshi, on Yoshi's Island no less. Once the game is completed, the stork is then able to complete the delivery to the brothers' parents. Why did Kamek decide to kidnap these innocent babies, though? At this point, Bowser doesn't even know who they are, so a preemptive kidnapping to make capturing Peach easier simply makes no sense. What could possibly be his motive this time? Well, actually, this kidnapping had little to do with Bowser at all. In fact, he was a baby at this time as well, but that's also something we'll get into in a bit. The baby brothers were kidnapped because of a premonition, if you want to call it that, from Kamek. If we take a look at the original instruction booklet for the game, it states that before the events of the kidnapping, Kamek had, quote, divined last night that twin babies this morning will bring disaster to the Koopa family. So, if you think about it, Kamek was almost entirely responsible for beginning the eternal grudge between the Mario brothers and Bowser. However, I can't help but wonder, what if Kamek's divine prediction here was correct? What the hell were these seemingly harmless newborns capable of? I guess we may never know. Nearly 20 real-world years later, with the release of Yoshi's new island on the 3DS, we learn that the stork actually delivered the brothers to the wrong parents, which may just be an excuse to use the same exact story as the first game, which it does, but it's an interesting tidbit nonetheless. The second piece of media covering Mario's origins comes in the form of an anime exclusively released in Japan known as the Amada anime series Super Mario Bros. The series is actually a retelling of several Japanese fairy tales, so the canonicality of it in the Mario universe is pretty questionable. Regardless, the episode containing Mario's origination is known as Super Mario Momotaro. It also happens to have an explanation for Princess Peach's origins, but we'll cover that when we talk about her. Anyways, one night while an elderly Hammer Bro couple was looking up at the sky, they noticed a huge projectile coming straight towards them. When it lands, it turns out to be a giant peach. It splits in two and out comes Mario. Can somebody tell me what the is going on here? Moving on from that, let's take a look at another extremely obscure piece of media that explains parts of Mario's youth and even a bit on his parents. This is... Ew! What the is that? Anyways, this is Family Album The Early Years, a single-page comic that first appeared in the Nintendo Comics system, originally being published in 1990, making it one of the earliest appearances of both Baby Mario and Baby Luigi. This was even before Mario and Luigi were solidified as twins, so in this comic, Luigi is depicted as significantly younger than Mario, and also looks... Oh my god! This comic explains Mario's odd interest in plumbing from a young age, shows the torsos of both of his parents, along with a few other bits of background information on his upbringing. Like the fact that he played baseball with a plunger like some weirdo. With all of that said, let's move on from Mario's origins and take a look at some other interesting facts about his life and adventures. So, originally, years before the release of Super Mario Bros., Mario was depicted in numerous occupations before he was a plumber. In the original Donkey Kong arcade game, Mario was a carpenter. This is probably his most popular original occupation up until the Mario Bros. Arcade game, but he has also been seen as a generic construction worker in Wrecking Crew for the Versus arcade system, as well as in a couple Game & Watch titles. In a manual published in 1993 known as the Official Nintendo Character Manual, we can find a bit more background information on Mario, as well as quite a few other Nintendo characters. This manual was meant as a guide to anyone licensed, for whatever reason, to publicly convey any of the listed characters in any fashion. The guide included explanations of each character's personality, with the largest focus being on Mario, as well as stuff as specific as the exact colors that the characters use in every part of their aesthetic look. To start, in Yoshi's description, we find out that Mario is of the species Homo Nintendonus, obviously in similarity to the human species Homo sapiens. This may seem like nothing more than a comical fact until you start to think a little further into it. Let's take a look at the inhabitants of the Metro Kingdom in Super Mario Odyssey. These are likely Homo sapiens, with builds and features very similar to the average human. In contrast, we see Mario with a far more short stature and pronounced facial features. This simple mention of Mario's species technically entirely explains why he looks so different compared to the inhabitants of this city. Mario's main description in this book describes him as a family man that also tries to take care of his brother. While there are many scenarios where this is true, we can also see Mario being a complete prick to Luigi at some points. Most specifically when Luigi achieves something that Mario doesn't. Take this cutscene from Mario Power Tennis, for example, which plays whenever Luigi wins a trophy, where Mario literally steps on Luigi's foot and aggressively rubs it in, seemingly out of jealousy. While not ever directly stated, moments like these heavily hint at Mario's fragile ego and insecurity in relation to his brother. It seems that the only person Mario wants to see in the spotlight is himself, presenting childish reactions during any instances of his brother's success. This is made even more disappointing when you realize how often Luigi gets the short end of the stick and doesn't even bat an eye across the entire franchise. It almost seems like this dynamic between the brothers is intentional. There are far too many consistencies to be pointed out here for it not to be. Mario is completely happy to support and associate with his brother as long as his brother takes a backseat to him. Luigi has always been cited as the sidekick to Mario, there's no denying that, but I rarely see anyone talk about how odd their sibling rivalry tends to be whenever it decides to rear its ugly head. Decades of games have shown that there may even be some sort of grudge between Mario and his brother that he never really let go of. Perhaps, deep down, he knows that Luigi is better than him in many aspects, but cannot stand the sight when that actually materializes in the real world. I would like to clarify that I am not a licensed psychiatrist or therapist, and I reserve no responsibilities for the mental diagnosis of Mario or any relating characters. Finally, moving on from Mario, let's take a closer look at Luigi's origins and background. While there is a lot of overlap between the brothers in terms of their canonical history, Luigi still has some interesting facts of his own, though not nearly as many as Mario. Returning back to the twin discussion, the official Super Mario Encyclopedia cites Luigi as Mario's, quote, slightly younger twin brother? Usually, this would just mean that Mario left the womb first and it's some sort of stupid twin joke, but other context clues really make it seem like Luigi is much younger than just a few minutes or hours compared to Mario, so it doesn't exactly make sense. We can only assume this was simply meant as a reference to how similar the brothers look. But then again, there was also Yoshi's Island where they arrived in the same sack, so I don't really know what to think here. Like I mentioned earlier, Luigi is the one who is kidnapped in Yoshi's Island, and it's up to Mario and Yoshi to save him. This means that, chronologically, Luigi was the first person Mario ever rescued, not Peach. Although there is a non-canonical discrepancy with this that I will mention later. Other than that though, there really isn't much else known about Luigi's younger years. He can be seen in the family album comic from earlier and is mentioned to have handed plungers and spanners to Mario during his formative years, but I honestly never want to look at that thing again. Who the hell drew this first slide and actually thought to themselves,
yeah, this is good.
Before Luigi's personality and look was officially pinned down, he appeared in a movie exclusively released in Japan known as Super Mario Bros. There's no way I'm gonna pronounce that correctly. It roughly translates to Super Mario Bros. The Great Mission to Rescue Princess Peach. The film is a loose interpretation of the events of the original Super Mario Bros. And is actually one of the first ever adaptations of video games to film in history. What I want to focus on, however, is how Luigi looks in the movie. The color scheme of his clothing is completely different, sporting a blue and yellow scheme as opposed to his now concrete design of green and navy. His sheepish and clumsy personality was also not present in this film. Instead, he was portrayed as a money-hungry and serious individual, which likely turned out to be inspiration for someone who came later. Something else I found interesting about Luigi was the fact that he is potentially the only person known to have ever seen a Shy Guy without their mask. In the same type of cutscene in Mario Power Tennis, this time for the Shy Guy's victory, we can see the Shy Guy trip on his way up to grab his trophy, knocking the mask off of his face. Luigi happens to be standing on the stage when this happens, reacting in horror and confusion at whatever happens to be under the mask. Beyond this though, I really couldn't find much else on the Green Man, unfortunately. As much as I love Luigi, it looks like we have to move on to the next character. The Koopa King's lore, unlike the majority of other characters in this universe, almost goes just as deep as Mario's. Like the others, let's start with his origination. In the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, Bowser can be seen as a baby when the team visits the Kingdom of Youth. Here he is known as King Goo Goo Gaga Koopa? I'm just gonna move on from that one. A baby version of Bowser can also be seen in Yoshi's Island as the final boss. Many people think that this is Bowser's son, Bowser Jr., but that is not the case. This is what is officially known as Baby Bowser, which implies that Bowser and Mario are quite close to the same age. The main distinguishing factor between them is that Baby Bowser doesn't have a drawing on the bandana tied around his neck, and sometimes doesn't even wear one at all. Little seems to be known about Bowser's parents though, as the only person ever seen to be raising him, if you could even call it that, is Kamek, which leaves that aspect of his upbringing as a complete mystery. This younger version of Bowser continued to be the main antagonist of multiple Yoshi games that followed as well. It's also worth mentioning that Bowser actually meets his infant self at some points and even teamed up with him during Mario and Luigi Partners in Time without even knowing each other's identity. The real interesting stuff about Bowser can all be found after his childhood though. According to the character guide that I mentioned earlier, Bowser's main reason for enacting terror on the Mushroom Kingdom in the first place was because he, quote, could not stand the idea of happy fungi. The fact that he could not tolerate the sight of others being happy is actually his motive for every single game he appears in as the main antagonist. Now, I could go into another deep discussion about Bowser's mental health here, of which I am also not at all qualified to talk about, but I think you can probably piece the puzzle together for yourself this time.
You need a therapist. Now.
It's also said in that same character guide that other Koopas hate and fear Bowser, seemingly because of how abrasive and destructive his personality really is. Like we've seen quite often in the Paper Mario as well as the Mario and Luigi series, the most common Mario enemies are not inherently evil. You meet plenty of friendly Goombas, Koopas, and Bob-ombs and actually end up teaming up with quite a few of them as well. The enemies you fight are simply servants to Bowser, possibly against their will, which I see as a likely scenario for many of them. Bowser's family relations surprisingly do extend beyond Kamek to an extent. Other than his children, of which I will discuss in a bit, Bowser has been mentioned to have a brother on a few rare occasions. Bowser's alleged brother only appears in one single game, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, as the World 8 boss. Most notably, this Bowser sports a blue color scheme in contrast to his brother. The reason we know this is a real Bowser and not one of the fake ones often seen in the first two games is that when the player kills this Bowser, it does not turn into one of the common enemies as it did in the previous 7 worlds. This Bowser simply just plays a normal death animation. While the acknowledgement of this character as Bowser's brother is spotty between pieces of media, a few Japanese Mario encyclopedias are usually cited as the main source of this information. Later on, this exact blue color scheme can be seen in Super Smash Bros. As an alternate recolor for Bowser. In both Smash for Wii U and 3DS and Ultimate, they happen to be the 8th recolors, directly corresponding with the fact that Blue Bowser first appears in World 8. There are other Bowser recolors present in some Mario sports games, but they don't seem to be accurate to the original game's look, so I believe these are purely coincidental. Let's talk about Bowser's children now though. This includes Bowser Jr. and the Koopalings, Larry, Iggy, Wendy, Morton, Roy, Ludwig, and Lemmy. Bowser Jr. is actually Bowser's only biological child, with all of the Koopalings being adopted. However, Bowser Jr.'s mother is also unknown and never mentioned anywhere. He does at one point call Peach his mother in Super Mario Sunshine, but I think it's pretty obvious he was just confused considering his actual mother has never been in his life. They actually confirm that she is not his mother at the end of the game, probably because they didn't want anyone to think that Peach and Bowser, called up the stork. The official Super Mario Encyclopedia from before cites Larry as the leader of all the Koopalings, and in that same Super Mario comic series I mentioned earlier, there's actually a comic completely centered around all of the Koopalings themselves. Also published in the Nintendo Comics system, Bowser Knows Best is a comic picturing all the Koopalings trying to decide what to get Bowser for Father's Day. Taking a look at their dialogue in this specific part of the comic can give us some insight into each of their personalities. Iggy is apparently extremely unintelligent, with Morton getting quickly frustrated with his incompetence. On the contrary, Ludwig is depicted as intelligent and poised, making comments about how Bowser needs cultural refinement from his present. In response to Ludwig, Larry, does that, and Lemmy seemingly translates Larry's nonsense, but doesn't exemplify any characteristic tropes for himself here. Wendy seems materialistic and maybe even selfish, as she mentions getting something for herself instead of her dad. Finally, Roy seems to be sadistic, suggesting that they commit a pointless act of violence in his father's name, most likely referring to doing something to the caged bunny sitting right in front of him. Funnily enough, Roy's suggestion, based on what we've observed so far, probably would be the best gift for Bowser.
Oh yeah, your birthday's coming up. Do you want anything?
I want you to kill someone.
I beg your pardon? You heard me? Kill someone. Anyone, really. I don't care. Well, I don't know about that. How about, a Chipotle gift card?
Can you not respect my one birthday wish? I want you to take someone's life.
Luigi!
Finally, to round it off, we have one part of the Mushroom Kingdom's royalty, Princess Peach. Not much is known about Peach's origins, and while she does appear as a baby in multiple games, her upbringing is never really touched on anywhere. However, the non-canonical discrepancy I mentioned about Luigi being the first person rescued by Mario actually relates to Peach, so I'll discuss that here. In Mario Momotaro, the Japanese exclusive anime I mentioned earlier, the Hammer Bros are actually raising Peach before they even meet Mario. One day, Bowser simply shows up to the house they lived at and kidnaps Peach in an effort to get her to marry him. She declines and he ends up throwing her in prison. It was after these events that Mario decided to fall out of the sky inside of a giant fruit and set off to save her after he rapidly grew up. Once again, this is based off a Japanese fairy tale, but it's still funny to mention nonetheless. Moving on to something more canon, the character guide mentions Peach as the daughter of the Mushroom King. The Mushroom King is never actually seen in any games, but he does appear a few times in the Nintendo Comics system, as well as being mentioned in the original Super Mario Bros. Instruction booklet. In the comics, the king is depicted in a way that makes it seem as if he has gone senile, appearing extremely scatterbrained, confused, and unintelligent in his few depictions. This explains why Peach is said to direct most of the Mushroom Kingdom's monarchical and societal orders, essentially taking up the throne in her father's place. Peach's mother is also mentioned once in this series of comics, but the only time she is ever seen is in a separate piece of media titled How to Win at Super Mario Bros. Very little is known about Peach's mother, as she is barely mentioned anywhere else. And finally, there is one more thing I found on Princess Peach, for now. The character guide mentions her having the power of white magic, which, if we're basing our context off of other media, is centered around the idea of healing and restoration. Now, there is a much bigger purpose to this magic that I am not going to mention today, but one of the other prominent uses for this magic is also mentioned in the same passage. Her magic apparently has the ability to keep her elegant gown starched and clean, even in Bowser's dark and filthy dungeon. How convenient. Like I've hinted at multiple times already, there is still much more Mario lore to take a deeper look into, and trust me, it gets deep. But for now, that's all I'll leave you with. If you're to take anything away from this, just remember that both Mario and Bowser need therapy, badly, and that Luigi is a victim. Oh yeah, and Peach can clean her clothes with her mind or something.
See, now was that really that difficult? I am really not appreciating your attitude about this. You know, your brother's a real piece of shit.